It had been raining since morning, the kind of rain that wasn't heavy enough to drench the streets, but steady enough to remind you of every conversation you wish you'd handled differently. The sky over Seattle had folded into gray layers, pressing low against the city, as though the clouds were carrying secrets they didn't know where to put. I watched from my apartment window, 5th floor, facing the quiet side street, where puddles gathered like forgotten mirrors. It was Saturday, Mom's birthday. I wasn't there. I had known for 2 weeks that I wouldn't be invited. There had been no call, no text, no, "Are you coming?" The silence was its own invitation to stay away. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd grown used to being the afterthought in a family that measured love through attendance and agreement. But as the day drifted on, that familiar ache began to hum beneath my ribs. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like the rain. At 7:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from the family group chat. Tessa. We figured you'd be too busy with work again. Mom says hi. Attached were pictures, balloons, candles, a cake that said Happy 60th, Mom, in pink cursive. Everyone smiling. Everyone pretending. Dad in his gray sweater, the one I bought him last Christmas. Mom in her floral dress holding a knife above the cake, looking proud, surrounded by people who looked like they belonged. And then I saw it, my old seat at the end of the table. Still there. Still empty. Like a placeholder for a daughter they didn't want but couldn't quite erase. I stared at it for a long time. That empty chair said more than words ever could. It wasn't just about missing a dinner. It was about every small, cutting moment that led here. The years of, you work too much, you don't visit enough, you're so distant lately, Mara. They said it like I'd abandoned them. But no one remembered that I was the one who covered Mom's hospital bills when her insurance lapsed. Or the one who wired Tessa money when her emergency car repairs turned out to be a spa weekend. They always took, always expected, and somehow, I was the one they said had changed. I made tea, chamomile, because it was what I always did when I needed to calm the storm inside. The kettle hissed, the whistle rising, sharp and lonely. I poured it into a mug and sat at the small dining table by the window. The steam curled upward, soft and ghostly, like something half alive. I didn't drink it. I just held the mug and let the warmth seep into my palms. Sometimes silence doesn't mean peace. It just means there's no one left to argue with. I scrolled through the photos again. In one of them, my mom's hand rested proudly on Tessa's shoulder. A picture-perfect moment captioned, "So grateful for my family." No mention of me. Not even a small tag. It was strange, how absence could feel louder than presence. I could hear the echo of our last argument, still replaying in my head like a scratched record. Mom, you're so cold lately. Mara, you never come home. Me. Home stopped feeling like home when you made me the problem for trying to live my own life. Mom, you think success means you're better than us? Me. No, Mom. I think success means I don't have to apologize for being different. She hadn't responded after that. She just pursed her lips. That small, tight disapproval that used to make me shrink when I was a child. Not anymore. Still, it hurt. It always did, no matter how much you tell yourself it doesn't. Because deep down, every child wants their mother to be proud of them, not because of what they can give, but because of who they are. I glanced around my apartment, the framed degrees on the wall, the soft light spilling across the wooden floor, the quiet hum of a life I had built entirely on my own. I should have felt proud. I did most days. But that night, pride was just another word for loneliness. The phone buzzed again. Tessa. Mom says she misses you. You should call her sometime, I almost laughed. The same woman who hadn't invited me to her own birthday missed me? Maybe what she missed was control. Having me there to play the role of the grateful daughter. The one who never said no. I put the phone face down and exhaled. The room was quiet except for the rain tapping against the glass. Like a patient reminder of everything that passes whether you want it to or not. Then, out of nowhere, another notification, a new message. But not from the group chat. Unknown. Number, "Hi Mara, this is Ethan, Tessa's boyfriend. Could we talk for a minute?" For a moment, I just stared at it, confused. I barely knew him. We'd met once. A brief handshake at a family barbecue months ago. He seemed polite, careful, maybe even a little shy. Why was he messaging me now? I typed back, "Is everything okay?" His reply came almost instantly. It's about something that happened tonight. I think you should know. My heart kicked once in my chest, steady but alert. Something in the way he phrased it, quiet, almost apologetic, made me sit up straighter. I typed again. What happened? But the typing bubbles disappeared before I got an answer. For a few seconds, I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the window. A woman caught between the life she'd built and the family that refused to see her as more than a paycheck with a pulse. The rain thickened, streaking the glass in slow, trembling lines. I watched it blur the city lights into gold and gray, like watercolor bleeding across paper. The kind of view that looks beautiful from the outside, but feels empty when you're the one inside watching it alone. The phone stayed silent. No reply. I didn't know it yet, but that message, that small, hesitant line from a man I barely knew, would quietly rewrite everything I thought I understood about power, family, and belonging. I didn't pour the tea out right away. I sat there until it went cold, the mug heavy in my hands, the rain still whispering against the glass. Somewhere across the city, my family was laughing over dessert, never realizing how easily they'd drawn their own line between love and shame. And somewhere else, maybe in the same house, maybe in his car afterward, Tessa's boyfriend had decided to cross it. I didn't see Jason again until Monday morning. The office lobby felt colder that day. Glass walls catching the weak light of dawn, the soft hum of elevators breaking the silence. I walked in early as usual, coffee in hand, trying to bury myself in the familiar rhythm of work. Numbers, reports, meetings, they were the only places where emotion didn't reach me. Then the elevator doors opened, and there he was. Jason, wearing a navy suit this time. Polished shoes. He looked like someone who didn't belong to the world of laughter I'd glimpsed through my sister's Instagram posts. The kind of man who seemed unbothered by noise. His eyes met mine for half a second, and then he gave a small, polite smile. Professional, controlled. Good morning. Ms. Carter. Morning, I replied, steady. He followed me into the elevator. For a brief moment, the mirrored walls trapped the tension between us. I didn't realize, he began carefully, that you were Emily's sister. My hand tightened slightly around the coffee cup. Neither did I until last night. He nodded slowly, exhaling a quiet laugh, one of disbelief more than amusement. That explains a lot. The elevator dinged at the 21st floor, and I stepped out first. He didn't follow right away. He lingered, as if deciding whether to say something. Then, "For what it's worth," he said, his voice lower now, "you didn't deserve how they spoke to you." I paused, looking back over my shoulder. "You heard that?" I did. He looked almost guilty. "Your father's words." I couldn't just sit there. I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because deep down, I already knew what kind of person Jason was, the kind who spoke only when something truly mattered. That afternoon, the whispers started. The HR intern spotted us talking in the hallway, and by noon, the entire office knew that Jason, the new regional director, was dating Emily Carter, my sister. I caught the glances, the subtle curiosity, the quiet hum of judgment that followed me. But I didn't flinch, let them talk. I'd spent too many years shrinking myself for other people's comfort. By Wednesday, I was in my boss's office, the real boss, not Jason, a man named Robert Evans. The CFO, he was an old-school professional, the kind who'd seen too many messy workplace romances to trust coincidences. "Lena," he said, tapping his pen against the desk, "I assume you've heard the chatter?" I nodded. "I'm not going to pretend this isn't awkward," he continued. "You and Jason have a professional relationship, and now a personal connection through your sister. It could raise questions?" "I understand," I said. He looked at me, long, assessing, and then nodded slowly. "Good, because I also know your record here. You're competent, reliable. You've earned your respect." That word, earned, echoed in me long after I left his office. At home, the silence was thicker. I still hadn't spoken to my family since that night. Mom had sent a single text. "You know you hurt your sister. You should fix this before her boyfriend thinks poorly of us." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. That was the kind of love I grew up with, one that existed only when I was useful, or when someone else's reputation depended on it. Friday evening came with a soft drizzle, city lights bleeding into wet pavement. I stayed late, finishing reports. The building had emptied out, except for the faint hum of the cleaning crew and the low murmur of Jason's voice a few rooms away. I heard him before I saw him, speaking on the phone. The tone soft but strained. Yes, I've met her family. No, they didn't mention her much. A pause. Yeah, I think she deserves better than the way they treat her. Something in me stilled. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words lodged somewhere deep. When I stepped into the hallway, he looked startled. Then, embarrassed. Sorry, he said quietly, pocketing his phone. You weren't supposed to hear that. I'm glad I did. For the first time in a long time, someone had spoken for me. Not out of pity, but conviction. We stood there for a long moment. The office was dark behind us, only the city lights painting gold across the glass. Lena, he said finally, your family. They don't see who you really are, do they? I smiled faintly. They see what they want to, someone who will always clean the mess even if I didn't make it. He nodded, his expression softening. Maybe it's time they see something different. 2 days later, it was Mom's birthday dinner. I wasn't invited, but life, it seemed, had a strange sense of timing. That same night, Jason was scheduled to meet Emily's family officially. He hadn't told me where, and I hadn't asked. It wasn't my place, but when I saw his message hours later, I didn't expect this, but I think you'll want to hear what happened tonight. My heart began to pound. He sent a voice note. In it, I heard the faint clinking of glasses, laughter, and then a shift. A cold silence, he said. They were talking about you, Lena, making jokes. About how you were always too serious, too cold. Your father called you the family accountant who forgot how to love. Your sister laughed. Then I told them, a pause. That's strange, I said. Because she's the reason I got this job. She's my boss. Silence followed. The kind that no one can fill. They looked like they'd seen a ghost, Jason continued. Emily dropped her fork. Your mother went pale. I laughed then, quietly to myself. Not out of revenge, not joy. Just release. For once, they'd been forced to see me, not as the one who owed them, but as the one they underestimated. Later that night, I stepped onto my balcony. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet earth and electricity. I thought about calling Mom, not to explain. Not to gloat, but to say, I'm done proving I belong. Instead, I opened my laptop, wrote my letter of resignation, and sent it. Not because of Jason, not because of them, but because I was finally ready to start somewhere that didn't hold the weight of my family's ghosts. The city stretched out below me. Lights, windows, stories I'd never know. I let out a long breath and whispered, almost to the wind, they don't define me anymore. The morning after Jason's voice note, I woke to sunlight, thin and pale, like something hesitant to return. For a long while, I just lay there watching it slip across the ceiling. It felt still. Not empty, but full in a quiet way, like the air before dawn when everything is waiting to begin. I hadn't heard from my family since that dinner. Not a call, not a text. Just silence, the kind they used to punish me with when I was a child. Back then, it terrified me. I would rush to apologize for things I didn't do, just to hear their voices again. Now it only confirmed what I already knew. Peace doesn't always come wrapped in warmth. Sometimes it's just the absence of noise. I made tea, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. There were unread messages. One from HR confirming my resignation had been processed. Another from Jason. They know now. You don't owe them an explanation. He was right. But closure, I realized, wasn't about them understanding me. It was about me no longer explaining. By noon, I found myself walking through the old neighborhood, the one lined with maple trees and narrow sidewalks that used to scrape my knees when I was learning to ride a bike. Mom's house stood at the end. The same beige paint, the same creaking gate. But everything felt smaller now, like the house had shrunk to match the truth I'd spent years avoiding. The driveway was full. Emily's car, Dad's old sedan, even the neighbor's truck. They were still there, probably cleaning up after the party. I almost turned back. But something in me, that quiet, steady voice that had carried me through late nights and silent disappointments, said, not this time. So I knocked. Mom opened the door. For a second, she froze, the surprise flashing across her face before it rearranged into control. "Lena," she said carefully. "We didn't expect you?" "I know," I said. "I came to return something." She stepped aside reluctantly. Inside, the house smelled of roses and leftover frosting. Balloons drooped along the ceiling, their strings brushing against picture frames. Emily appeared at the hallway. Her expression was guarded, her lipstick smudged like she'd wiped her mouth too hard. "Oh," she said flatly. "You decided to show up after all?" I looked at her, the younger sister I'd once tucked into bed, whose homework I'd done, whose mistakes I'd cleaned up. She didn't even realize that half her comfort had come from my sacrifices. "I didn't come for the party," I said quietly. "I came to return my set of house keys." I placed them on the console by the door, the same spot where I'd once left rent money when Dad said times were tough. Dad emerged from the living room then, holding a beer bottle. His voice carried that same casual authority, the kind that always demanded obedience disguised as care. "You don't have to make a scene, Lena," he said. "Your mother was hurt you didn't come last night." "Hurt?" I repeated softly. "You banned me," he shrugged. "You know how families are. Emotions run high. Let's not blow this out of proportion." I almost laughed, because that sentence summed up my entire childhood. Everything I felt was always too much. Emily crossed her arms. "Jason told us what you did. How you embarrassed me in front of everyone." I tilted my head slightly. "You mean when he told the truth?" Her jaw tightened. "You used him. You knew who he was and didn't say anything." "I didn't know," I said calmly. "And even if I had, I wouldn't have hidden who I am just to make you feel smaller." The room fell quiet. Even the clock seemed to pause. Mom sighed heavily, like she was tired of the conversation. "You've changed, Lena," I smiled faintly. "No, Mom, I stopped apologizing." For a moment, nobody moved. Then I reached into my bag and took out a folded envelope. "This," I said, placing it on the table, "is the final payment for the loan you asked me to co-sign for last year. It's cleared now." "The house is yours," Mom blinked, confused. You paid it off?" "I did. Not because you asked me to, but because I wanted to walk away clean. No debts, no ties." Dad set his beer down. "You think you're better than us now?" I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man so used to control that he couldn't imagine love without ownership. "No," I said softly. I just stopped mistaking fear for respect. Then I turned toward the door. "Wait," Emily said suddenly. Her voice cracked, just slightly. He still talks about you, you know." I paused. "Jason?" She nodded. "He said you're the reason he stayed with the company. That you're the kind of leader people don't forget." There was something fragile in her tone, jealousy mixed with confusion. Maybe even shame. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just sadness, and for both of us. We had grown up in the same house, under the same rules, but she'd chosen to survive by pleasing them, while I'd learned to survive by disappearing. Now, we were both paying the price. "I hope one day," I said quietly, "you realize you don't have to earn their love either." Her eyes glistened. She didn't respond. I walked out. Outside, the air was cool and alive. The drizzle had returned, light and steady, soaking the edges of my sleeves. I didn't rush. I let it fall. As I reached the end of the driveway, I looked back once. Through the window, I saw Mom pick up the envelope, Dad pacing, Emily frozen by the door. For years, I had imagined this moment with anger. Some grand confrontation, some poetic justice. But now all I felt was quiet. They weren't villains. Just people trapped in their own blindness. And I, finally, wasn't trapped with them. That night, I went to the pier. It was the place I used to escape to after family fights, a long wooden stretch that jutted into the dark water. I took off my shoes and let my feet hang over the edge. The waves were small, whispering against the pillars. In my hand, I held the last object that connected me to that house, a gold locket my mother had given me when I was 16. Inside was a photo of us, smiling for the camera, pretending we were okay. I opened it, looked at the picture one last time, then closed it gently. "Thank you," I whispered, "for teaching me what love isn't." And then I let it fall, the locket sinking soundlessly into the water, vanishing beneath the moonlight. It wasn't a gesture of anger. It was release. I sat there until the night thinned into silver dawn, until my tears dried, until I could breathe without memory pressing on my chest. When I finally stood, the sky was beginning to soften. I walked back home barefoot, free, unburdened, whole, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back.